Talk away, Mr. Harrington.
Well, I suppose you want me to talk about the great nameless thing of Sycamore.
Oh, it has a name.
I'm aware of this name that many people don't want to repeat. As for my own experiences with it, I guess I first met this thing. I suppose it was 2000 or 2001 when my family first acquired a farm on Sycamore Creek, the old Collins farm. Um, it was a few months after we'd moved in, if I remember correctly. I was in my room, and my mother and her boyfriend were in the living room, which faces the main road. And my mother's boyfriend, who I will call Jay, um, called out something along the lines of "there's someone in the yard" or "somebody's around the house." So I had a rifle, my deer rifle, in my room, and I came out with it and asked him what was going on. He said there was someone standing in the driveway underneath the streetlight staring at the house. Um, so he got a shotgun, and I got a flashlight and stood on the porch while he looked around. And as he walked down the driveway, he saw someone or something take off running and jump over a creek, probably about 8 feet wide, and run through a briar thicket, which he couldn't follow, of course. So we're kind of perplexed as to what we'd seen. Who would be lurking around the house that could jump an 8-foot creek and run through a briar patch? When we walked around the back of the house and saw a strange red light moving around in the loft of the barn. To clarify, we didn't have any animals on the farm, and there was nothing in the barn but a few bales of hay. So I went directly to the barn. He goes around the creek that he saw the guy jump across and up a field. The barn had 2 doors. We each came in a door. If there had been anybody in there, they couldn't have gotten out. We climbed the steps into the loft, and there was no one there. While we were in the loft, we heard footsteps below us, and peering through the cracks, it was a fairly well lit night, a full moon. We couldn't see anyone below us. All of a sudden, there was the sound of running feet, and he got a glimpse of something running out one side of the barn, raised the shotgun, and fired. It did not fire. The firing pin apparently dropped against the the firing pin dropped against the cartridge, but it didn't detonate. We're starting to get a little concerned at this point, as it were. And as we're standing there wondering what's going on, we looked out the other window, and it was overlooking an old rundown chicken coop. The original owners had probably built this years ago, 50s or 60s at least. And we both saw this dark shape, a humanoid figure, 7 feet tall, long arms, faint glowing red eyes. I remember this, I remember the eyes. And it drifted. It didn't walk. It kind of floated into the chicken coop. Now, bear in mind, I still had my rifle with me, and he still had the shotgun. And I'm glad there were no chickens in that coop that night. It began to resemble the scene from Predator in the jungle. We fired into the chicken coop with at least a couple dozen rounds, and the thing is, there was nothing there. No footprints, no blood, no hair, nothing. This wasn't the only time that the black mass, the black shape's been seen on that hollow. There's a lot of energy, a lot of spiritual energy surrounding the farm that I lived on. I never saw it there again, the black form at least. I had instances where you would hear footsteps inside the house. You would see figures out of the corner of your eye in the house. My wife even claims to have seen a ghost dog, a large black dog out of the corner of her eye, which wasn't there when she turned her head. But we never saw the thing with the red eyes, although many people on the hollow have. Were you wanting to hear more of the ghost stories in general?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. There was a room in the farmhouse. You're going to laugh when I say this, but we called it the room with the funny smell. I can't describe the smell except to say it was like, imagine opening a can of sardines and leaving them out for a few days, and that was the smell of this room. Even if there had been no one in the room for days, it would acquire this strange fishy smell. We couldn't figure it out. It became my brother's room, and he complained about the smell coming and going, which I suppose if something had died underneath the floorboards or in the walls, it would have begun to stink and then went away after a while, but this was recurring over the course of a couple of years. Soon after I moved out, I ended up moving to Texas for a few years, and when I moved back, no one lived in the house. My parents had bought a double wide, and the house sat empty, and I moved back into the old house, and I smelled it again. It would still come and go. I later found out that in the 80s, that room belonged to the son of the family that lived in the house before us, and he was mentally challenged. And the room, they said, always smelled strange while he lived in it. And he had died several years before my family had bought the farm. Now, he didn't die in the house, but it's a strange occurrence. Another incident that happened in the house, a friend of mine came over and spent the night. Now, the house was built around a fireplace. It was a double-sided fireplace with a large chimney. The original house had burned down years and years ago, so I'm told, and they rebuilt it around the original fireplace. One side of the fireplace opened into the living room, and the other opened into what used to be the master bedroom, but I had it converted into a library and sitting room, house all my books. My friend came down to spend the night, and he decided he was going to sleep in the library. There was a door between the library and the living room. So the next morning, I asked him how he slept, and he replied something along the lines of, "Fine if it weren't for the ghosts walking around in the living room." I asked him what he meant, and he said he heard the sound of boot steps coming across the hardwood floor of the living room up to the door of the library where they stopped. And my wife, we had not been out of the bedroom all night, and there was only 3 of us in the house. I myself had heard footsteps in the house. We experienced a strange electronic interference one night. We had a set of electric speakers that we had hooked to a flat screen TV in the living room, and every night they would start buzzing. The speakers would emit this buzzing, humming noise. And several times my wife and I saw a strange misty shape near the speakers at night when they were making the sound. At one point I had a horse. I bought a horse at an auction with the intent of breaking him to ride. He was a large black stallion, half Arabian, half quarter horse. And I would let him out into the field to graze, and several times around the edge of dark, his ears would perk up, and he would look back toward the barn, and eventually turn and gallop back up to the barn and go back into his stall by himself. It's odd behavior for a horse. Once again, I later found out something that made this make a little bit of sense. The fact that the original owner of the house owned a large black horse, and in his latter years before he died, he would go up to the barn and sit with the horse. This is just a few of the more memorable stories I can think of right now, but a lot of minor things happen as well, and it's those that build up over the years that really paint a picture of a place as being a strange place to live or not. But that's probably my most memorable ghost stories from Sycamore Creek.
So was it living in this house that led you to become a paranormal investigator?
No, actually I've grown up around ghosts, I guess you can say. The house, a single-wide mobile home that I grew up in Van Leer, or Van Leer proper, Sycamore's part of Van Leer, was haunted. And my mother, in her wisdom, gave her young son the haunted bedroom. And I had a lot of experiences with footsteps coming down the hall in the middle of the night, my door creaking open, voices beside my bed, and seeing a particularly malevolent spirit in the room one night. I've had several incidents in haunted houses. I don't know if I'm just attracted to haunted houses or ghosts are attracted to me or it's just I'm sensitive to them. But I decided, in my early 20s to kind of become a paranormal investigator and try to make some scientific sense of what I've been experiencing my whole life.
Thank you.
When it comes around, I don't know if it feeds off of the fear
It
or
feeds
the
off
anger,
of anger
or...
and violence and arguing.
And all good ghosts do.
Well,
Break you down mentally.
Tell him about the time you and Liz was fighting and your tablet flew off your granny's.
I don't believe that was it, though. And that's what this whole thing is circled around, is the 7-foot stringy freaking finger.
I thought you said you never saw it.
What's better
It
for
has been
purification
described
again?
multiple times by different
What
people.
Frankincense or myrrh?
I grew up on Sycamore. My family, I'm pretty sure, had been there since the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, maybe before. They lived on different locations, and different members of my family had lived in different locations on the holler. My aunt and her family, my grandmother and grandfather, and my uncle pretty much lived in a straight line, address-wise, about an eighth of a mile up past Mr. Harrington's old place. The first time my family had any experience with the thing, my uncle was not, to my knowledge, a very welcoming man to his family. It was not a predominantly happy household, and around that time is when we kind of started putting things together to figure out that whatever it is being the entity that was witnessed by the Harrington, it does not like fighting, any type of anger, stress, any type of high energy output in a negative way. My aunt had 3 homes burned down on the same spot of land. One increasingly more mysterious, but nothing was ever ruled out through the police that it was foul play. She had witnessed in the latter event that there was a black mass described as expanding the width of the bed that they had, and my uncle being a bigger man, I'm pretty sure it was a queen-size bed. It was floating about a foot over him, horizontally, and when she entered the room, it kind of disappeared, and she stated that there was a fireball that shot out of the breaker box and hit the wall, but there was no scorch marks on the wall afterwards. My cousins, being younger, in high school at that time, had stated that they had seen it kind of lurking around the home for a few days before it actually caught fire. Thankfully, nobody was home when it happened. But as you go on up the road, it progresses into paranormal activity at my grandmother and my grandparents' house. After my grandmother passed away, my aunt had came over and started arguing about all the possessions that were left And as she was leaving, in the laundry room, which was at the front entrance door, double wide, it was on the side, everything on the shelf above the washer and dryer, it was like somebody took their arm and just scooped it off on top of it. And she was the only one standing in the room. Up from that, my great-grandmother lived there adjacent to my uncle, and it was a 16-foot camper, I believe. She said that one night it sounded like someone had got up under her trailer and was going to tear it apart, but it was kind of dumbfounded at the point because there was underpinning completely around it. There was no way into it. It just kind of goes on as the families progress up the holler. I don't believe we have anybody from the other families that predominantly live there that's going to talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
My great uncle lived at what is now known as the head of the holler, because the road had been cut out. There were houses many years ago farther up from his, but for all intents and purposes, the road just kind of stopped at his driveway. From there, I have been out in the hills and have found the remnants of some of the houses, chimneys left, steps, and things like that. There was, at one time, suspected witchcraft up there. Not exactly sure who or where it was, but me personally, I kind of have to tend to either some of the stories are true or they're just tall tales, but in my experience, there's always a little bit of truth in legends or stories that are being told. I don't really have any other information at this point that I can think of. So.
Eli's back with us because he remembered a story that is. I shouldn't laugh, but it's probably one of the funniest stories I've heard.
It's unsubstantiated, which is one of the reasons I didn't mention it earlier. But
Yeah, we don't know if it's true. Take it with a big grain of salt. Take it with a salt block.
Supposedly, there was a boy who lived about halfway up the holler. This being back in the 60s, 70s, and he had a bad leg. And he would walk with a crutch. Like one leg was 4 inches shorter than the other. So he would walk everywhere with a crutch. But the house I lived in was owned by Joe Collins. And Joe had the only TV in the holler. So the boy would ride a bicycle with his crutch down to Joe's house to watch TV for a couple hours a day. Then he would ride the bicycle back to his mom's house with the crutch. And one night, he had been down there until after nightfall watching TV, and on the way home, he passed by, it was maybe 100 yards up the road from Joe's house where this happened, and he claimed that something big and black crawled down out of a pine tree and thumped heavily on the road, got up, and started chasing him. Don't know, but when he got to his mom's house, he dropped his bicycle at the driveway and was running without the aid of his crutch as fast as he could into the house.
I think the boy got chased by a bear.
They thought it might have been a bear, but a bear will not. Well, bears can climb trees, but a black bear does not normally live up in a tree and then crawl down and chase someone. So, he said it climbed down out of the tree, and if I remember correctly, it climbed down out of the tree to about maybe 6 feet off the road, then let go and fell, and then stood up and started running at him,
Could have been
insinuating
Sasquatch.
that it was running on 2 legs. I don't know if it was a Sasquatch or a ghost or a demon or what, but like I said, a bear doesn't normally jump out of a tree and chase you on its hind legs. That's kind of a strange thing.
What about Skinwalker?
Once again, who knows? It probably wasn't a person, and it probably wasn't a bear. If the story's true, which, like I said, I'm not going to say it is, not going to say it isn't, it's a story that's been passed down on the holler and everybody swears it's true. If it is, somebody needs to get the Winchesters up there because it's pretty bad.
Aggressive?
No, it never manifested physically aggressive. It would just.
Did you make the Ouija boards, or
No, my ex and my brother did.
of course your brother be involved?
It's
Yeah.
a wonky
And,
shit that you make a deal.
I didn't want a part of it, you know. But then again, I didn't put my foot down to say no, you can't.
Even though it was your house.
That was a point in my life where I felt lost in everything that I should have had control over. That
But you know you're safe here.
it makes
The
me
devil
feel
himself couldn't step foot in here.
Nope.
When I get to talking about my past up there, it's not where I'm at, who I'm with, what's been done. It's everything floods back into that memory.
Takes you back to that state.
The surrealness is almost that I'm there when I talk about it.
So when we go back, when Eli goes with me to Sycamore, do you not even want to go?
I want to go.
Sycamore,
I'm leaving that up to you. If
I'll
you
tell
do
you
not
this.
feel comfortable going with
It
me,
is a surreal place. You are not who you are when you go up there.
I respect that.
And the longer I talk about it, and the longer it kind of lingers, the more stressed or panicked I be-
You live up
Um,
Sycamore long enough, especially in certain energetic spots in Sycamore, you stop being yourself, and you start becoming what you
I
fear
think-
most in yourself.
I think the interesting thing about Sycamore is that the road that you turn onto before you get to Sycamore is fine.
Yeah.
I'm up that road all the time because I have a family up that road. Turning up Sycamore is a different story.
Yeah.
It's like
It's something at the turn off that it's like a switch is flipped and the energy of the road changes. Do you notice that, Cody?
Yes, everybody.
It's like a dread when you go up
Yeah,
there.
exactly. It's a heavy, oppressive feeling.
Because I absolutely hate driving up to Sycamore. I have had one, like, not near Cody's mom's house experience with seeing things.
You don't even have to experience the paranormal. Like, people that are just dead to feeling these things feel like this oppressive, heavy sense when they go up the holler.
You ever notice that you kind of you dread staying up after dark to drive out because it seems like it takes twice as long to get out as it did to come up?
Yes.
It's like it
No.
stretches.
Where's
the
that barn you was talking about? I've been up there before because I've picked you up
road.
and I've dropped you off
No,
before.
The Lafferty's barn, I don't know if it's still standing or not. Was
Is it before or after your mom's
after
house?
mine, After mine.
Okay, so
It's
I've
on
been
up
there because
there.
I've passed your house before the first time I went up to get you.
You know where all those trailers are sitting on the left past his mom's house?
Yes.
The old
That's
barn
Lafferty.
sitting up there. From that point up, it's like there's different entities for different sections.
Yes. They're like warlords that have control over a certain area. You know, that's the best way I can describe it. It's like freaking Somali warlords up there, but they're demons.
So what happens between the barn and your mom's house?
It's just that feeling that you want to run. You want to run to get out of that stretch, but you know if you run, it's just going to make it worse.
You experience that too, Eli? Or do
I
you
never
not
had
walk
much
up
time.
between those two?
Well, there's a different feeling.
Because I know your house was further down the road.
From about his mom's house down a little past my house to like where Dwayne Lafferty lives, that is a completely different zone. I lived in the zone of the black thing.
And it stretches from there up to the light pole past my mom's. Just a random electric pole next to the road that it kind of switches over. My brother was actually coming home one day and walking home from Laffertyville, and Mom asked him who the other kids were walking with him, and he said that there was nobody with him when he was walking up the road.
Is there someone else in the house?
experience is not so much that I physically see the manifestations. It's just I get the, I guess you could call them still images in the back of my head on what things look like.
Now, would you ever move back there? You and Eli both still own property up there, right?
I don't own it. My family does. This is all I own.
Technically, yes, because it was written in the heirship of John Goble,
Yeah.
and I am legally an heir, so yeah, I do own property up there. It's just the family's wishes have kind of split it up through different people.
But you don't see yourself moving back and raising your family.
No, I had intentions. If I could not find a place that I would get something and move back up there,
If you had to be homeless and move up there, what would you do?
I would move back up there.
Knowing what you know.
Yes, because not everything up there is bad. I have family members that are still on the grounds that have passed that I know would probably cast a protective veil around my kid. My wife has dealt with enough personal experiences with paranormal by herself that I know that she's witnessed some of the things that I've been through. Yeah, it's living up there. You just take it day by day, and you get used to things. It's not something that someone outside the area could easily transition to. You have to have either grown up there or lived there long enough to experience everything and deal with it in your own way.
So do you have names for the entities?
No, I try not to get that personal about things. I would rather them remain nameless and figureless,
It might help you deal
because
with
the manifestation of a physical form, I think, would only hinder my, want to be anything in the paranormal investigative circuit.
I think giving it a name would help you though, honestly, because instead of having this, well, what was that?
Giving it
Mystery.
a name invites it to stay.
And giving it a
Look
name.
up Sycamore. They'll come in and make themselves at home. Put
Give
their feet
him-
up on the coffee table.
To me personally, now this is my own belief, if anybody else doesn't agree, they don't have to. I personally believe that if you name an entity without any proper knowledge about it, that it gives it power. You're pretty much recognizing it as a normal living person. Regardless if the entity was never living or not, you're giving it the same power in your house that, say, I would give you if you walked in, invited or not. If you're not invited, I don't want you there. I'm not going to call you by your name. I just know I want you gone.
If I die and I come back to life somewhere, you better call me the Bootstrap Ghost.
I do agree with Mr. Harrington over there and his bouts with the thing. It is, in a loose sense, hindered by the physical rush of adrenaline and the fact that you feel like you're conquering something. If you take away the fear, the depression, the sadness, the grief that it feeds on, and start fighting back with your own emotions, it kind of doesn't like to be around. You're not wounding it, but there's nothing there for it to,
Feed off of.
yeah.
I think that's why it's not open, because I'm
In my trailer, another instance other than the Ouija boards, which I don't know if you got on camera or not. My brother and my ex-girlfriend at that time had indulged in making homemade Ouija boards in my house, which I did not condone. To my knowledge, I didn't even know it was there. So I was laying in my bedroom playing PlayStation 2 at that time, and I keep getting yelled at by my brother, telling me to come into the living room, and when I do, that's when I see the Ouija board and what's going on. And I asked them what they wanted because I didn't want any part of it, and they replied with, "What we've been talking to has been asking for you for the past 30 minutes."
I find that interesting because when we used a Ouija board with a friend of ours, it was really interesting talking to you.
When was the last time you had your energy read?
Last time I had anything done was Hillbilly Days this year in Pikeville, and had my tarot read, but I shuffled and dealt my own cards, and they were interpreted by somebody else. Never really had my energy read or anything like that. Then again, the fact that I still feel something around me, whether it be guardian angel or spirit animal or what have you, that still kind of vexes me because I don't know what it is, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to know. Now back to the trailer and the Ouija boards. I never really got any straight answers out of what was wanting to talk to me. I did ask where it was, and it kind of moved and stated that it was in front of the TV or in the TV or beside me. I don't know. I was looking in the black glass of the TV at the reflection of myself, which that now saying aloud kind of worries me a little more. Before that, we had a dog in the house, and every night from 10 p.m. to midnight, it would run to the bedroom door, run back, run to the bedroom door, bark, run back, and it would get to the point where I knew that whatever was in the house was getting close to the door because the dog would run under the bed and whimper. Footsteps from the back side of the trailer up to the kitchen, they would stop. Normal everyday occurrences when I lived there. You kind of harden yourself to it and realize that if it's there, you're living. If it doesn't bother you, you don't bother it. And that's really my whole thought on everything is I'm not going to provoke something that I don't know what kind of power it has because I doubt myself in that kind of dabbling in things. And I know that is a big mistake that people make when they don't really have enough spiritual connection or experience in themselves to take on something that isn't living. I guess until we go up Sycamore, this is
Definitely give me a shout next time we go up there. I want to feel this.
this is it.
Like I said, my biggest load.
So, Cody, what do you think is wrong with, or what do you think is going on with the road?
I think that it is. I don't have the historical knowledge to know what went on in that area. I would like to say that it is a culmination of all the heartache and grief and hardships that the families, through however long people have lived in that area, have had to deal with and overcome, or if it got the better of them, it did. It's definitely an emotionally charged area. There is more than likely hundreds of unmarked graves there. I know when New Route 3 came in, a lot of the graves that were where the new road goes through now were relocated. I don't exactly know where they were relocated to, but I'm thinking some of them weren't exactly moved the way they were supposed to be.
Just headstones?
There's
Possibly.
graves on Sycamore Creek dating from the Civil War. There's graves dating from the 1840s. There are graves that only have stones as markers. There are Indian burial mounds there. It's a place of death. And that's exactly what it is. It's a place of death and a place of evil.
I definitely think that things got worse when the strip mining came into the area. I think it released a lot of energy that was kind of trapped by the ground, if that makes any sense at all. Because I know from personal experience, renovations to a house can liven up energy, and instances and occurrences with the paranormal. So, with that being said, I do believe that disturbances to the earth can do the same thing. I think it's a portal, a very thin veil between the living and the dead, regardless on which way they met their maker. It's basically a living purgatory. Things don't leave, and those that are living somehow always get drawn back in the end.
It's a fine line between the living and the dead,